Zelda has dungeons. People like dungeons, and that's something I have in common with people. Here's 10 I like. I didn't write an intro, so that's about all I got. I'll be honest, I don't really care for the Majora's Mask dungeons. I generally prefer everything revolving around them, both story and location. Except for Southern Swamp, you're boring as all get out. That being said, all of them are memorable, as opposed to, like, Midoro Palace. Yeah, who knows what I'm talking about without looking it up. Snowhead is a temple that, growing up, I revisited a lot. Because this temple, coupled probably with Woodfall, are the temples that have the greatest effect to the world once completed. The mountain thaws, and not only do you see a difference, there's so much you can do. Bomb keg, frogs, races, frogs, gilded sword, frogs. But let's focus on the actual dungeon. This place is really tall, which means your goal is to ascend. The enemies are all appropriate for the dungeon, because while it is a primarily snow level, it's also about 1/3 lava, so a few of the enemies are fire-based. The dungeon also makes good use of the Goron ability, which is actually a strength for every dungeon in this game. The masks are utilized an appropriate amount. But the Snowhead Temple uses it in the most diverse way, I feel. There's the obvious strength of the Goron, but then it also allows you to use the walking on lava ability for the first time in the game. Plus it shows you how versatile the Goron roll can be. Okay, technically, if you're the worst, you may have used it on the road to the temple, but this is the first time it's necessary. Plus, you really get to unleash the roll for the boss. Which brings me to... Goat is, Goat's pretty gross. He's pretty gross. This isn't appealing to look at all. I mean, even the art of the dude is pretty vomit-inducing. But hey, maybe he looks better remastered. No, bail! Goat is easily the most unique boss in the game, and for the time, the series. There was never a chase battle that had been done before. All the other games had arena battles. It's basically a tradition. And there were even other multi-boss battles. But a chase was new, making it interesting. Plus, I liked seeing Goat get buried. But enough about me judging things on a surface level. I can't have the infiltration of Hyrule Castle higher on this list because Four Swords Adventures doesn't have traditional dungeons. The game has levels, not an overworld, so there aren't any dungeons to discover and explore. But I feel like this level type is essentially a dungeon, as each world has 3 stages, the last stage holding the boss. Since Zelda dungeons finish with bosses, the 3rd stages are closest to dungeons. Plus, and this is the real kicker, Zelda Wiki considers it a dungeon, and I don't think I'm in any place to question the internet. Doing so usually gives me a headache. This is a part action, part stealth mission, and I feel like it's stealth done right for a Zelda game. The stealth in Wind Waker was kind of a pace breaker, and the stuff in Twilight Princess was pretty short-lived. This stealth type works for Zelda because it doesn't have to slow down. In Wind Waker, to get past a moblin, you have to wait for him to pass. In FSA, you have to get past the lights, and sure, you can wait for a moment, or you can be resourceful and break some pots and make some noise they'll respond to, making a path. It's a minor thing, but it lets you decide how you'll play. And this is the multiplayer game, so you can strategize with all your friends. Probably. Admittedly, the puzzles aren't too mind-blowing, but like I said, this level's big point for me is the stealth. And the Poe boss, who looks like Jalhala's little brother from art school, is a pretty entertaining and fast-paced battle. The face shrine teaches you not to take things at face value. Okay. Now, there are actually 2 face shrines, Northern and Southern. Southern is just 3 rooms, which reveal the truth about Koholint Island. A good prelude to the real dungeon, the Northern Face Shrine. This dungeon lives up to its name. The map is a face, the boss is a face, the statues are faces, the enemies are faces, and they're all smug. But hey, the dungeon is actually really well laid out. Plus you get the stronger bracelet, which is definitely a welcome gift. I admit the mini-boss looks a bit unintimidating, but the little jerk is certainly persistent. And the boss, Facade, is pretty unique, albeit a bit easy. I think I should admit that the biggest reason I like this dungeon is story-related, and that could easily sway my judgment on the quality of the place as a whole. That being said, I don't think that it's just a bad dungeon without the story aspect. Like I said, it's got a pretty nice layout. For instance, and this may sound dorky, which would be a big juxtaposition to the cool I radiate, but I really like this room. The challenge isn't hard, but I just think it's really clever to jump on the blocks when everything before this in the game involved you going around them, and this is something they reuse later in the game. And the never-ending hallway allows for some head-scratching without being infuriating. Just don't mess up, or you'll have egg on your face. You'll have egg on your face. You didn't even let me... Okay, well, level 7. Well, the first quest's level 7. I would completely understand if people totally disagreed with me here. It has a lot of things you're just supposed to know. You're supposed to know that the Goria is here to signify a dungeon. You're supposed to know grumble grumble means feed me. And you're supposed to know you need 1,000,000 bombs. Again, not expecting everybody to agree with me. Need to see my friend picture again? I like the thrill of bombing a wall and finding a hole. And with all the hidden walls and dodongos, you'll be going through a lot of bombs. But that's actually not a problem in this dungeon. There are rooms of Gorias everywhere, so boomerang and slice to get them back. Plus, there's a bomb upgrade in this dungeon. And that's the bomb! And there's a revisit from multiple bosses. Plus, there's a literal money room. Also, number 7 was level 7. Didn't see that comparison until I wrote it down. Let's call a spade a spade. Skyward Sword isn't renowned for its dungeons. In fact, a lot of them feel a bit uninspired. I've played this game dozens of times, and I still feel nothing significant from the Fire Sanctuary. And the Ancient Cistern feels like they picked a word for the theme and worked from there, not like they were adding to a world. Not inherently a bad thing, but also not likely to capture hearts. Hearts. 'Cause Zelda. There are 3 dungeons that are interesting though. Lanayru Mining Facility, the Sand Ship, and the Sky Keep. I hardly consider Sky Keep a dungeon myself, more like a mini-dungeon, and the Lanayru Mining Facility is very much determined to be finished at its own pace, not yours. Although this scene is really pretty, so I'll still ask it to prom even if we won't date it all afterwards. So that leaves us with the seemingly universally approved of Sand Ship. I like it a lot. It's easily the most creative dungeon in the game, both with the build-up, discovery, and actual design. The level ins and outs meld together really well, making good use of the time shift stone and the finally gotten arrows. And even though it can take a while to complete, it doesn't feel like it's taking a while. Now, let's say the obvious. Tantalus is a very squishy-looking boss. But the distracting squid aside, look at everything else from this fight. A really creepy setup with the ship being attacked. The currently unseen monster is sending its tentacles through the structure of the ship. And after the reveal, look at the environment. You're on basically driftwood with destruction around and a storm raging. That's actually pretty intense. If it weren't for the purple hand puppet, this fight could easily be considered the best. And I would like to point out that I got through an entire paragraph on Tantalus and tentacles without once mentioning hentai. The Ice Palace, the self-sufficient dungeon. There's no way in from the outside. You've got to sneak in from another dimension. Now that's a protected home. Okay, if your parents were watching, that was for them. Now, this place is pretty clever, a level making good use of puzzles between multiple floors. Plus, it requires either some memory or good map usage in order to work around the red-blue blocks. This dungeon also gives you a new look. Link's new threads can protect him from damage. Like this outfit. See? Nobody's gonna want to touch that. The boss, Cold Stare, is pretty easy, just make sure you have a good magic supply for that fire rod. Makes things go quicker. The only downside is that there's so many darn spikes to avoid. Don't get me wrong, I like watching hockey, but I wouldn't always want to watch blood bounce on ice. Playing Oracle of Seasons, you might notice something. This game is a big love letter to the original Legend of Zelda. And I don't just mean unsolicited poems. I mean this game is attaching photos of the Legend of Zelda of itself that it wasn't aware were taken. That was a really gross image, I don't know why. This is exemplified in both the presence of the old man and the fact that most of the bosses are brought from the original. Of the 8 dungeon bosses, 1 is original, 1 is from A Link to the Past, and the remaining 6 are from the original Legend of Zelda. That only slightly relates to this dungeon list, it's just something I like to remind people of. But from the Oracle series, my favorite dungeon is Season's Explorer's Crypt. There's nothing Explorer related, but the level is below a graveyard, hence Crypt. First, and this is more dorky than legitimate, if you put all 3 floors together, they make a skull. While Oracle of Ages is more puzzle-based and Seasons is more action-based, this level is a surprising go for puzzles in Seasons. There are a lot of switch-based puzzles, multi-floor operations, and a lot of magnet stuff. It's actually pretty diverse. Plus, the item you get is the Rocks Cape, which gives you a double jump, and I'm a huge fan of that. This dungeon's blast from the past is actually a curveball twofer. The boss is Gleeok, the multi-headed dragon, but the mini-boss is also a slight comeback. Despite 2 instead of 4, it's the Poe sisters, and they seem better than before. I mean, some ghosts use swords and magic fire, others twirl at you. It's like they learned battle from a merry-go-round or something. Alright, the Shadow Temple can be pretty frustrating. But this place sets a mood. But when it turns off the lights, it's not lighting a fire and pouring wine. No, it's leaving the room and locking the door, leaving you alone with the growling. This place takes the jumping tektites and sliding levers and throws them out the window for Dead Hand. It takes the cave and wooden walls and replaces them with Dead Hand. It takes the adventurous sounds of the water and instead puts in Dead Hand. The walls are lined with skulls, the voices in the dark echo of Hyrule's dark past. The place is lined with coffins and blood. The hollow drum beats are a soundscape reminiscent of a bottomless pit or even a skeletal rib cage. Plus, they tie into the boss, who drums so much it's in the name. The prelude to the Shadow Temple is the bottom of the well. When I was younger, the bottom of the well was something I always put off, because the video games were in the basement, and I wasn't about to hang out by myself in a place with gray stone walls for some reason. I'm not that 9-year-old. The hover boots are interesting. They're a bright gold in a dungeon that's brightest light is a blue flame coming out of some skulls. I'm sure that they're in some way symbolic, but I'm not about to decipher it. You're walking with the light! Okay. Also, the interaction with Bongo Bongo and Sheik and Kakariko is probably the best cutscene in the game. Final thoughts. I love the dungeon, but I'm also really satisfied to get teleported out of there. If you watched my top 10 Zelda stories, you could probably guess what my favorite Zelda game is, because I said it. Twilight Princess is my favorite, but that being said, while I don't think any dungeon is bad, they aren't all mind-blowing. So if you're wondering why it took so long for me to list one, hopefully that clears something up. The Temple of Time is a blast from the past. I'm not even gonna fake laugh, that was forced. But really, this level literally takes you back in time to a little bit later than Ocarina of Time. It's great to see the Temple of Time all revamped and nice looking. Also, while I'm pretty sure Navi's scene here was just symbolic of her leaving, there's also the idea that Navi just went to the secret back of the temple. But since you can't hear echoes of "Hey, listen!" it's unlikely she's there. So this temple is pretty neat in and of itself. First off, and I'm well aware that this is a personal preference, this temple looks really tidy and clean. All the other dungeons are dirty and dark, so they're, dungeons. But this one is a bit different. It's part of a place of worship and sword housing, so it's kept up well. In fact, I'd say a big part of why I like this place is the aesthetic. Now, I'm going to wash my mouth out with soap for saying that. But really, the puzzles are pretty easy to figure out, but not so easy that they feel pointless, allowing for pretty consistent progression pace. And the mini-boss and boss fights are both amazing. The one-on-one sword fight with the Dark Nut in the highest room in the temple is freaking amazing. Easily the best mini-boss in the game. Well, I'm tied. And the boss is the new spin on the classic Goma, but in a huge room that almost feels like a nest, coupled with statues for smashing. Finally, while the Dominion Rod isn't the most versatile item, still more versatile than others though, its very existence is a cool way to tie into other games. Twilight Princess goes back to Ocarina of Time to get an item made by those that tie into the city in the sky from Skyward Sword. For a game that likes ruining bridges, it can sure make them right back. This is the third ice dungeon on the list. I admit I tend to enjoy them, but they aren't inherently better. I mean, look at Spirit Tracks' Snow Temple. I guess that was cold. But seriously, I really do like snowy levels, not because of my last name, and my favorite Zelda dungeon is Snow Peak Ruins. So, the Snow Peak Ruins. Don't let the name deceive you. It may be a decrepit mansion in the mountains, but now it's a place that an adorable Yeti couple calls home. Yeto and Yetta are two Yetis who legitimately just want to help Link out. Yeto helps him get to the house, and Yetta really tries to get him to the Mirror Shard as soon as possible. It's just her sickness that's clouding her mind, so she sends him on random errands a few times. But the layout of the mansion really makes it seem like a fortress. I mean, how often did colonial mansions need a mechanism for moving steel cannonballs? I really hope the answer is never. I didn't actually do my homework on that. But the puzzles are fun. There's good use of both human and wolf form. And the actual look of the mansion, I think, is pretty stunning. I can be one to poke fun at the item obtained for the insane physics of it in Hammer Space, but I don't hold it against the dungeon. And the final boss is pretty easy to figure out how to beat, but I really like the actual battle space. And the love seen by Yeto and Yetta is pretty heartwarming. I mean, Yeto's a pretty smooth talker. Oracle of Seasons could learn a thing or two. And yeah, honestly, by Zelda standards, this dungeon is a pretty big outlier. But I think that makes it special. It's a pretty cool dungeon. We're moving past that joke, and it's the one I look forward to the most when playing Twilight Princess. And Twilight Princess is the game I look forward to most when thinking about Zelda. I mean, we all have things that draw us to the Legend of Zelda series. Be it the dungeons, items, characters, stories, there's something we can smile about as we set up the adventure. Yeah, a top 10 list may not be necessary, but I wanted to share something I love about Zelda. Feel free to do the same and let me know about it.